You're listening to Chicago Stories, a podcast from City Hall featuring the stories of everyday Chicagoans, as told to Mayor Emanuel.
This is Mayor Emanuel with Peter Sagal from NPR's infamous Wait, Don't Tell Me. Now, Peter.
Yes.
Welcome
Thank
to the
you.
show.
Thank
Now
you.
you know there's Chicago Stories.
I know.
Okay.
Who knew?
Hey, have you told the family?
Yeah.
Okay, who?
It was weird. Well, I told my fiance.
I just want the rabbi's son
No,
because I need something in the
No, my
big
rabbi
book.
brother. My rabbi brother. No, my rabbi brother does not know. My nice Jewish girl from Skokie, fiance knows. She knows. She's impressed.
Okay.
She's impressed. So that's nice. But it's all very
She
confusing.
didn't do what Amy would say, which
No.
is, well, why are they having you? That's what
Exactly.
Wait till you're
Why are
married.
they-
That would be the
Oh.
first
Oh,
question
really?
your girl from Skokie
They ran out of anybody else, huh? Oh.
Why you?
Yeah.
Why are they interviewing you?
I guess Michael Feldman's retired, so they had to use you.
That's
okay.
right. So
yeah.
let me ask you a question.
Yes.
One brother's a rabbi.
Yes.
The
You
other
have
one's
done
a-
your.
the other one's an attorney.
You're asking if I'm a disappointment to my parents? Yes, I'm sorry.
No, like I've noticed like 7 jobs until this job.
Yes, it is a little strange.
Yeah,
I was more or less
you
unemployable.
can't keep a job as
No,
kinda-
apparently not. I'm quite.
What are the other jobs now that you have this kind of mastered? If you could go back a second time,
I kind of miss being a playwright.
You do miss-
Yeah, I do. And I've spent a lot of time hanging around Chicago theaters, which is one of the things that makes the city so great, because I kind of miss that. And a playwright is also a great job for somebody who has no social skills.
what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm sure you wouldn't understand about somebody who simply couldn't manage to get along with people, but that was sort of my thing. No, it doesn't have. No,
not for me.
No, never. But I got a job. I can't remember. I was in a theater when I got out of college, and I found out that I was really bad at working with people. I was constantly disappointing them by not doing things on time or saying the wrong thing at the wrong moment.
I'm glad you've internalized this.
Yes, no. One reaches my age, one understands one's limits, and I realized if I was a playwright, then I could write my plays, and then other people would take them and do something with them, and I could stand in the back of the theater and resent everybody silently, which is I'm good at.
Kind of like the producer's moment. When
Yes, exactly. I mean, and so you just stand back there and you go, these fools are not doing it right, but you don't say it out loud. And so that worked out well. And so I spent about 10 years on my own, enduring my own company. And there was, like a lot of people who spend their times on their own, I listened to public radio all day because it was sometimes the only voices I heard. And I would just say to myself, I could do this. I could gas on for an hour about stuff. Why don't they call me? And one day they did. And this was 20 years ago. I don't know if you know this, but Wait, Don't Tell Me is celebrating.
I do know that, and you were a guest on the show.
Yeah, no, I was actually a panelist.
Yeah.
Because it turns out that one day I got a phone call from the producer at that time, and they were planning the show, and they were looking for, the way it was described to me, funny people who read a lot of newspapers. And I was like, I could do that. And it turns out, so I auditioned, and I got to be a panelist on the very first edition of Wait, Don't Tell Me, the very first show, broadcast January 3rd, 1998, a week before my first daughter was born. And it was terrible. It was quite bad. It was based here in Chicago at WBEZ, and I would get these missives from Chicago about how terribly things were going. And I don't know if you remember this, but there's a huge change at WBEZ.
Right.
They canceled all these shows, and they put on all these new shows, and people were not happy because public radio listeners,
Once they get in their groove,
they don't like change.
No.
They just don't.
I used to tell President Obama, people hate the status quo,
Yeah.
and they're not too excited about change either.
Exactly right. They hate everything about what you're doing, but even more if you try to change it.
Yes.
So they were very, very mad. So they were very, very mad at Wait, Don't Tell Me. They were very, very mad at Tori Malatia, who had sort of hosted us at BEZ. And so things were looking dire. And they had no other options, I think, at this point. And they apparently someone said, well, how about the Sagal guy? He seems vaguely hosty.
Vaguely.
Hostish. I don't know. So they called me up and they said, how'd you like to be the host of the show? At the time, as I said, my oldest now daughter had been born. My then wife was from the upper Midwest.
Right,
Beth, very good, from the upper Midwest. She wanted to come back to the Midwest. I didn't want to live in Minnesota again. Chicago, as you may know, if you're familiar with it, is a large
I did
city.
not know it until the Amazon bid that we're in the Midwest.
Did you not? Wait a minute. Let's take a moment. Come on.
I did.
Really?
Of course.
Yeah. You have
It's the heart. It's the most American of American
I
cities
know
in the
that.
heartland.
It's the Midwest,
Yeah.
but it's a large American city in the Midwest, so it seemed like a good idea.
Yeah. So you
And so
came
off
home.
we came. I came home. I came sort of home.
Yeah.
It's home now. I didn't realize it was home. I just thought this was going to be a stop on my way, to further
playwright.
glories. Yeah, well, I thought I'd continue
Playwrightness.
writing my plays. Basically, there was a Pulitzer, if not a Nobel, somewhere in the future. I just was going to stop here in Chicago for
Before,
a while.
obviously, since you're the middle child, you were definitely getting both the Nobel and the Pulitzer before your brother was recognized as chief rabbi.
Exactly. I just
And the
had
other
to
one is,
constantly
as
beat
head of the
him.
bar.
Yeah,
I
you're
know.
joking, but you're not joking because you know about this.
I told you, middle children.
Yes.
We wrote a book titled
Did you?
War or Peace. We could do either one. True or not true?
Now, people have wondered this. I'm going to ask you because your
No,
brother.
this is my podcast.
Wait a minute. No, I mean,
okay.
because people have wondered about your brothers who are
Yeah.
well known. Is this something that goes around the Emanuel dinner table when you get together for Pesach? This weekend, for example? Are you going to be like, Ari? Well,
No, I will tell you a true story, but we're going to get back to you.
Yeah.
Which is, this was a period of time where the television show about Ari Gold was
Yes.
on. The West Wing was on.
Yes.
Which is based, about the Clinton White House, etc. We have a character. I have a character. So Ari and I said to Zeke,
Yeah.
You're embarrassing the family. You
We
haven't
have no-
done any. There's not even you haven't done a single thing to
Yes.
bring any honor to this family.
Is there no fictional character
no
vaguely
idea.
based on you, sir?
We said, yes, you have an MD, you have a PhD, and you're a doctor.
Yes.
We're not very impressed.
Yes.
And because the truth is, Mom and Dad aren't impressed either.
I'm sure.
They want you to do. So that's what we said. So let me ask,
Yes.
Marchez, what are you guys doing special for your 20-year anniversary?
Not much.
No, come on.
No, we are going to have a big celebration in the fall because NPR works slowly. They did send us an edible
Is there-
arrangement in the week of. That was nice.
How many committees are being organized to come up with
It
this?
takes a while, as you can imagine. It's public
It takes
radio.
a village
It
at
certainly
NPR.
does. And so we're going to have a big celebration, I believe, at the Chicago Theater, where I've always wanted to play. And we're bringing in a bunch of special guests and a bunch of panelists, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to do.
Okay, over your tenure,
Yes.
who's been your favorite guest? Who's been, I don't know if this is fair, the one that you thought, okay, this is a great person. How do we get him or her? And then it turned out to be not that.
Well, that's a tough. Oh, I'm sorry.
You don't have to
you
go
want me
to-
to dish?
No. I said the first one, which was who is the one you would like to interview again because they were so good.
Well, I don't know if you know Barack Obama, if you have a number for him, but weuld like him to come back. We had him on the show when he was
A senator.
Yes, it was on his birthday in the summer of 2005 because he had been a senator for about a year. I remember it was a birthday. We gave him a cake, which he didn't take with him. And I remember
Didn't fit in the diet.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
But I remember he left the room. He was live with us at the Chase Bank Auditorium, and as soon as he was gone, I turned to the audience and said, "That guy's going to be president, so it's my fault." I have literally never been in the presence of someone who was so,
Commanding.
well, in the case, he was charming. He had this amazing ability to sort of read the room and to know what the room wanted. And what the room wanted was him to be funny and to get in a couple of digs at us, and he just did it perfectly and then moved on. He was like,
Right,
that
your
guy's pretty good.
second person you
So
would
he was
like.
great. I've always wanted to have George Bush on. because-
43 or 44?
Well, we take both, although I think
Okay.
the elder Mr. Bush might be a little ill, because we spent 8 years making fun of him. And certainly in recent years, he seems to have a very nice sense of humor about that.
Having met him
Yeah.
and obviously worked in
Yeah.
both opposites, he has a very good, not only good sense of humor, a great self-deprecating sense of humor.
He does, which is nice.
Yes.
And I remember once he was asked, it was toward the end of his tenure, somebody said, "What do you think your greatest achievement is?" And he said, I think it was catching a 4-pound bass in the lake behind my house in Texas. And we mentioned that in the show, and Roy Blunt said, "I agree with him."
Yeah, it's
and
a-
got a laugh, but it was his joke. Remember when we had presidents who had senses of humor?
Well, it would be, yes.
Yes.
I
It
just
was-
got done with Dalek's book on Kennedy.
Yeah.
A great wit. I mean, and really quick.
Oh, yeah.
And both it was a great defensive tool for him when he didn't want to. Unlike now.
Yes. No. Not. I actually have an argument with Gene Weingarten of the Washington Post about whether Donald Trump has a sense of humor, where he has ever made a joke in the context of he says
Not
something.
one that hasn't been written like for the White House press corps or a gridiron or something like that.
But his humor, to the extent that it is entirely of the belittling variety, the nicknames. He doesn't seem to have any sort of ironic distance about anything.
You have your news show.
Yeah.
It is a news show.
Well, it's sort of a news show.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Why do you, and then you have comedy that's become such a dominant form of delivering news.
Mm-hmm.
And news has tried to morph itself more into entertainment than news. Why do you think comedy has become the place where people go to get information? And do you think it's in well service of the political system today?
I've actually thought a lot about this because people come up to me. I mean, obviously, Wait, Don't Tell Me, we started 20 years ago, at the same, we started almost exactly the same time that Jon Stewart started on The Daily Show,
right.
and we have been part, I guess, of this rise of political satire that has people doing it all over the place.
But beyond like Lenny Bruce and beyond George Carlin in a way.
It's become almost an industry, the satire industrial complex.
It's a lot that's a lot safer than Eisenhower's threat of the
exactly.
military.
I know. Be warned,
Right.
the industrial. Anyway, I think it has a little bit to do with, as you say, the fact that everything is becoming a kind of entertainment. If news is going to be entertainment, why not get entertainers to do it? They'll do it better than, say, Wolf Blitzer. But it also has a lot to do with the fact that the news itself seems to demand satirical treatment. I mean, as I'm sure you are aware, one of the frustrating things about watching the news, CNN, or even the New York Times, or whatever it may be, is that because of journalistic rules of objectivity, of seriousness, they can't they can't say what they might want to say and what is actually the most appropriate thing to say. For example, you may remember that in 2008, Sarah Palin, or at the time the McCain campaign, claimed that Sarah Palin, 1 year into her tenure as governor of Alaska, had a state with a smaller population than name your suburb of Chicago. Right. She had foreign policy expertise because you can see Russia from Alaska. They said that. And my memory of it is that like CNN had a panel and they were like discussing this. You know, they had one of their matrices, you know, like
the box.
Yeah, like the boxes, and there were like 9 people. It's like the Brady Bunch of assholes. And so CNN is like discussing this. Is this a real claim? I mean, is that a valid claim? Is this not a claim? I believe some news channel, maybe ABC, whoever it was, went out to Alaska to see if you can really see Russia from Alaska, and you can actually from some of the western parts of the state. And on my show, I said, I can see Lake Michigan from my office. Does that make me a sturgeon? And I think that is the appropriate response. Sometimes like derisive laughter is actually the most appropriate response.
I actually think, well, I'm not sure it's healthy, the satire industry.
That may be true and is another question.
Right. I'm not sure it's healthy and strong. I actually think mainstream media has failed.
Oh, without question.
And people would not turn to alternative if mainstream media was actually delivering information, not trying to be entertainment. And in their fight for viewership, they morphed into something that was totally empty from a pure information basis, etc., in the name of being objective. And second is the satire area stood up at a time when people were looking for something that actually got closer to and revealing the truth than what they were getting in the news.
I mean, it's
gone, in my view, it's undermined certain pinnings of the political process and democracy because we're all made fools of to the point that we're nothing.
I think that's right. I think everything you said is exactly right. I think that as you said, sometimes the media got itself into a place where they couldn't tell the truth, and so it fell to the comedians to do so. And at the same time, it, in the end, isn't really good for us. I don't think, I've referenced my earlier career as a playwright when I was a very arrogant young man. I'm sure you weren't like that. And I imagined that
the young man or the arrogant person?
Well, not. Right. And I imagined that I would speak truth to power, right? I would be out there telling the truths that no one else would dare to say, and by thus I would change the world. And then when I got into this business, I thought, well, okay, I'll be the jester who can speak the truth to the king and continue to speak truth to power. And what I found out is power doesn't listen to anybody like me. And further, they shouldn't when you think about it. I mean, you know, you're running this city, presumably, when you're not podcasting. And the last thing anybody who lives in the city wants you to do is to make a decision based on whether or not somebody like me is going to make fun of you for it. That should be the last thing in the world you worry about. And that has, as we discussed, been true of President Bush and President Clinton and President Obama. They didn't care. I interviewed President Clinton once on our show, and we made terrible fun of President Clinton in our first couple of years. And I asked him if he ever listened to the various jokes that were made about him during his tenure. And he said, yeah, he loved them. Talked about doing this gig with Phil Hartman from Saturday Night Live, right? Both of them, two Clintons. And obviously, as we've discussed, George W. Bush had his sense of humor, and that's great. It's only when somebody does really care, like, for example, the current occupant, that you run into problems.
Well, he cares about anything that has to do with criticism.
Yeah, he hates it.
I mean, you have to have certain steel and character, and he cannot handle criticism.
No.
And he's not self-aware to handle it in both a positive or negative way. And so anything is just an attack on him. And then, therefore, not only does he not have a sense of humor, he has no self-awareness.
And that's really bad, to have somebody
Dangerous.
who cares, to have a president attacking, as he did Stephen Colbert, for making jokes about him. And that's bad in a way. But it's also true that the people who actually make change, you can take the Parkland kids for this week's iteration, there will be another next week, they're not joking.
No.
And if you watch the speeches at Washington or here in Chicago last Saturday, nobody told a lot of jokes. And that's correct, because it was not
authentic.
It was absolutely authentic. I mean, I heard somebody once say that the problem with satire is that laughing at something, as healthy as it may be, is a kind of giving up about something. Well, you got to laugh. What are you going to do? You got to laugh or cry.
So you're here in Chicago.
I am.
You don't want to come to the Midwest. You're here in the Midwest. Yes. Why do you think this show succeeded in Chicago that it could not be, quote unquote, in New York? What do you think about satire, given we have Second City, so much of an industry in and around comedy? Why here? Have you thought about that?
Oh, yeah, I have, because it's connected, because we're still here 20 years later, and I don't know what else.
I mean, it's a national show, but it's out of here. So why Chicago, do you think? This is our road to saying Chicago.
I understand.
Then we'll go back to something else.
We'll talk about Chicago.
Yeah,
there are two basic.
I have to check the box here.
There are two basic reasons, and the first reason is that one of the great things about Chicago, as you may or may not know, is that it's 1,000 miles away from Washington, D.C., where our bosses were when we started. Mm-hmm. So when we were going through all these struggles, we had the blessing. I mean, you of course I'm sure you may have seen Fiddler on the Roof. There's a joke.
It's mandatory pre-bar mitzvah.
It's absolutely it is. The first Broadway show I ever saw. I saw the third revival in 1973, and there's a joke in the beginning, and somebody says, Rabbi, is there a blessing for the Tsar? And he says, a blessing for the Tsar. May the Lord keep and bless the Tsar far away from us. And that's what NPR was like for us, as we were struggling and trying new things every week. We didn't have vice presidents wandering through.
Let me say this is just like being a mayor. And when it comes to Washington, just stay there.
Nobody say anything. They won't notice us. So that's the first thing, that we had a chance to develop the show and find our footing and figure out what we were doing at a nice, healthy distance from our corporate bosses. God bless you if you're listening, NPR. We love you. But the second thing is related but different, which is one of the things I've always said as soon as I got over that whole sort of speaking truth to power thing, is I realized that our power, our appeal, is that we speak to our audience as one of them. Mm-hmm. We are not on the playing field with everybody else shouting at each other on cable TV or on the radio or anywhere else. We're up in the stands with you guys, the audience, watching the action. And because we're in Chicago and not in the political capital of Washington or the entertainment
You're not caught
capital,
by that.
We're not in that. You know, the panelists you hear on our show are not, you know, the usual green room regulars of Washington and New York. They're not the usual celebrities from L.A. So we're just guys out in Chicago looking around. I really can't do a Chicago accent, even after 20 years here. I'm sorry. I grew up in New Jersey. I envy people with good Chicago accents. But we're guys in Chicago, and we're looking around the same way everybody else does at all this stuff that seems to be happening as part of this remarkable and
I refer to it as Disneyland on the Potomac.
Exactly. And it's crazy, and if we were in the middle of it, we'd be part of it, but we're not. And that, I think, is our appeal.
That's why all successful campaigns are never run, presidentials are never run out of D.C.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
So what newspapers do you read in the morning? Give me your Daily Digest and morning, and then because we're in the internet age, it has to be more than morning. It has to be all day.
It has to be all day. Basically,
maybe it isn't. But
I read the New York Times and the Washington Post religiously
in the morning.
In the morning, and I think that they are I mean, I think, frankly, that they're doing amazing work since the election. Let's just say that. I
will definitely mark that before and after because I think they had a role to play
yes.
in the election.
And we can get into that, but I think that since
that would be
the
healthy therapy for me.
Yes, I understand. It was.
Yes.
And I've become, and of course, I read the Tribune in the newsroom at BEZ, and I'm friends with
after
many.
After the national papers.
Yeah,
That's
mainly
okay.
Well, because we're a national show.
It's okay. Keep going.
And so I need to do that. And then the rest of the day, God help me, I spend on Twitter.
No.
I know. It's terrible. It's the
God.
worst.
Why don't you just go for a run?
It's really, well, as you know, I do that from time to time.
I know. That's what I'm recommending more.
Twitter is bad.
You know what? I told Amy, put that thing down. Forget about it.
Yeah.
She started just recently, and she's obsessed. And it's dangerous.
It is a little dangerous. I don't want to make any jokes about addiction because that's actually a problem, but it really does feel that way. Like, oh my God, what's going on? And particularly, I mean, it's hard to remember what life was like before Donald Trump. I don't. But these days, it's like, what happened? I mean, like, my phone is off. I'm talking to you for 40 minutes. I'm wondering, what the hell's going on while I'm not watching?
Did you ever think that the George Bush tenure would be considered the halcyon days?
I know. It's crazy.
About Ozzie and Harriet?
I remember, you may remember when Barack Obama was elected, and we all thought, oh, everything's going to be fine from now. Sanity has returned.
Normal has ushered in insanity.
We'll have normal arguments about normal things. It'll be great.
See, I read the Sun-Times Tribune on the way to the swimming in the morning.
Yeah.
And then on the way to work, read the Journal and the Times.
Right.
And then during the day, I check online news stories, Washington Post, NPR. There's a app I have that has an amalgamation of different news sources. But all through the day and then the evening. But those are like, going back to my Clinton days.
Yeah.
I had to actually, and it tells you how far the world has gone. So I would get every newspaper Xeroxed, all the articles, and I would have to go through them. So when President Clinton came in the morning, there were a stack of articles that I said, here's what you should read. So I had to have read not only at that time, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, and Wall Street Journal. And then I would get a series of articles from Rona, and then he would walk in at X hour, and that's become a habit I cannot drop.
Really? Yeah.
4 papers a day is not a healthy.
No, it isn't. But I think it's healthier than what I do. See, the advantage of that, I remember those days. I remember those days when it came on paper in the morning. You'd read the paper, front to back if you were obsessive.
Yeah.
Check the baseball scores, and then you're done.
Well,
and then you move on with the rest of your day because you read the newspapers, you finished the coffee. Now you can do other things. And now it never stops. Now there's a new newspaper every 10 seconds. And it's madness.
I was in 2012, I take the train to work 3 days a week. So at one point,
how does that work out for you? Does that work out okay?
Yeah, totally. Oh. I mean, the other day, yesterday, some woman said she happened to like the raincoat, then talked to me about other things. Yeah, usually people, it's a nod. Some other people, we have all kinds of conversations and stuff like that. I've been always taking public transportation, take it now. So one day I'm leaning up against the back door.
Yeah.
It's quiet, it's in the morning, nobody's talking, right? And I look up and I'm reading the newspaper and everybody's on their iPhone. And I'm like, here's Grandpa. He remembers when the kid was bred. So I said, I got to stop this. This is not a cool look for me. So I go into I happen to have the newspapers on my iPad, and I went to the iPad. And I said, I'm never taking the paper on the train ever again.
Really?
Yeah, you just can't be the one guy.
Isn't it? But you know what I miss? I miss shaking the paper.
No, you don't. That's miserable. About holding your coffee in there.
Yeah, I know.
With it's not the right.
It's false nostalgia. I think I'd hate it.
What books are you reading now? Are you a one-book reader or multiple books?
You asked that question to George Saunders.
Yeah, I want to know.
And I am actually a multiple book reader, which is bad.
In different areas, meaning some nonfiction, something fiction, or some.
Basically. This is my struggle.
Because I think it reveals character if you read multiple.
First of all, I do read multiple books. I've got like 5 on my bookshelf plus a couple scattered around the house. Oh, let's see. I've got
Give me 3 out of 5.
Oh God, I've got a new book by Ken Jennings, which I have an advanced reading copy. He's a friend of mine. He's a guy from Jeopardy. I'm right in the middle of Chris Hayes' book, A Colony in a Nation, which is very good. If you haven't read it, it's excellent. I have a Lee Child Jack Reacher book I put down and need to pick up again. I've got a new book by this is shameful. I have a dear friend named Nicole Galland who wrote a best-selling book along with Neil Stephenson, and I have it and I need to read it, and it's sitting there waiting for me. My big problem is that I'm so obsessed with what's going on. I keep telling myself I need to read a novel.
You do. Well, I have never read a single book about the Clinton years, a single book about the Obama years. I've never read my brother's book about our family.
That's probably smart.
No, I've lived all those. I want to learn other things.
I
don't
think so, yes.
So you have to read. So if you what are the 5 books you would like to read of a novelist that if you could put all the 5 that are on the book stand away?
Oh my gosh, there are a whole bunch of novels that, I should have anticipated this question. I have all these, for one thing, I have all these novels by friends who I
You
want
said
to
you
read.
like George Saunders.
I love George Saunders.
Did you read his Lincoln?
I loved it.
It was a fabulous
I
book.
thought that was actually probably, I don't need to tell anybody this. That was the best novel I've read in a year. You know what else I read that was really great recently? Totally on a fluke. I read the original novella, Legends of the Fall. Remember that? It was by Jim Harrison.
Right.
It was made into a movie. I won't characterize it, with Brad Pitt and Anthony Hopkins about 20 years ago, which was laughed at because it was sort of ornate and big. But it's fantastic. It's like an amazingly good book, and I had no idea. I actually met his editor in New York, and he sent it to me.
Julian Barnes's book about Stalin and Shostakovich. It's a great.
I read one of his books years ago. I think it was A History of the World in 10.5 chapters. Yeah, it was the one, the amazing chapter about the enormous painting. Yes, I should read that. Yeah, you tell me what I should read.
Well, right now I'm reading *Sapiens*.
Oh, that's great.
It is a great book.
I read his sequel to it as well.
Right. I have not read that. I'm halfway through. I think that is a really, really good book.
Oh, he's
I
so
just
good.
finished Dalek's book on both FDR and Kennedy.
Right.
The 2 separate books. I'm a little lean, a little heavy on that. There's, I'll give you a book.
What?
The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace.
Robert Peace.
Yes.
I don't know that book. Who wrote that book?
It's a fabulous book about a young man that grows up in Newark.
I read about this.
It's
nonfiction, right?
It's a true story.
Yeah.
And you're watching a slow motion, I don't want to say more, and you're just yelling, don't.
Yes.
And you have to read it because you don't want to pick it up and you can't put it down.
I understand that.
It's a great book.
Oh, you know what else is great? Your friend of mine, Michael Chabon.
Yes.
He wrote his book, Moonlight. Have you read?
I have not read, but I've read his other books.
Oh, yes.
The Yiddish Police.
The Yiddish Police. The Yiddish Police.
He has predicted his other books, and then I want to get to a couple other subjects. Exactly what's going on between the right-wing Jewish community and what's going on in Israel right now.
Where? In what book?
Can't we just leave this to my questions of you rather than...
I'm talking to the mayor of Chicago.
No, I can see the cover. It's in our library. It's up on the 3rd shelf. I'll think about this in a second before you go home.
No, he read a great book called Moonlight, a fictional narrative of his grandfather, which I highly recommend. It's a little later.
I did read it about in Florida.
Yeah, he's living in Florida and he meets Werner von Braun at the end.
Yes, it's a very good book.
It's a very good book.
So let me ask you, you're a big runner. You had to start the interview before you walked in telling me that you wrote a story about you, in fact, in the Austin neighborhood run
5K?
that you beat me.
I did, although there are other things in
You
the
didn't
article
see
about
my-
the fact that I beat you, but that I thought would be most interesting to you.
Did you read this story I wrote for Swim magazine?
No.
About the fact that I beat you in the swim?
No, that would not be hard if you've ever seen me swim.
No, so what got you started? When did you start running? Have you always been running?
No, it's funny that you asked because I have a book about this coming out, my second book. It's going to come out in the fall. It's called The Incomplete Guide to Running. I was a runner when I was in high school, fell off it, got back into it, fell off it, and then I turned 40 back in 2005, and I was like, oh my God, I'm turning 40, I'm going to die. I know, I'll run a marathon, and then I won't die. It's worked so far. And so I ran the 2005 Chicago Marathon.
We have the Boston Marathon, and you told me that's in your bio.
So and I finished the marathon. And I thought
you almost died.
No, I almost died. I was like, oh my God, everything hurts. My hair hurts. I don't even have any hair.
Who recommended this?
This is terrible. But this weird thing happened, which is that I said to myself as I walked away from the finish line holding my banana and my medal, I said, I wonder if I can do that faster, which I never anticipated my saying because to put it mildly, was not much of an athlete growing up. And so I became much more serious and fell in with other people who were serious and started training regularly and ran the Chicago Marathon the next year and ran it 40 minutes quicker and got into Boston and ran Boston. And then when I was at Boston, I met the editors of Runner's World and I was on a panel and they asked me to write for the magazine. So I became a running columnist. And so I've run 14 marathons and I don't know how many half marathons.
My son just finished the LA Marathon.
Really?
He ran the Chicago Marathon. I'm very proud of him because he's still a junior in college and he did like 3:20.
That's amazing. That's very good. How old is he?
He is 21.
He's going to get better.
Yeah, I'm just impressed he's keeping his grades up and doing all the training that he's doing. So you interviewed Stormy Daniels.
I did.
We have that, so, you know. And
I can't tell you how excited I am that she's. That
let me have you. Did you actually go back and check if whether the book is doing better now?
I'm hoping that I get a bump.
Discovered
I know. I discovered Stormy Daniels because when her.
What was the basis of this?
So
this is. I love this fact.
All right, this is amazing.
And how did you decide? There's a lot of.
It was
performers. How did you get to Stormy Daniels?
This is what happened. I wrote another book 10 years ago called The Book of Vice. I tried to write something that was very not public radio. It was about various kinds of sin.
I definitely think that should be turned into a play.
I think so. And
Telling truth to power. There it is.
There it is. And one of the vices I wrote about Alinea here in Chicago. I wrote about.
That's not a vice.
Well, there are, overindulgence. I mean, some people would say that $800 for a meal is a little extreme. Mayonnaise, it's a different kind of vice.
Okay.
Different kind of indulgence.
Go.
And I read about a swingers club here in Chicago. But one of the things I wanted to write about was the adult film industry. So I went to LA and I did the visit on a set and I wrote about that. But I became friends with a woman who had been a publicist. And for the industry, and she said, I've asked some friends of mine, some women in the industry who contribute to this book I've edited, and we're coming to Chicago to do an appearance. Would you like to have dinner with us? Of course. So I had dinner with...
Let me check my schedule. Yes, I'm
I can make
available.
it. So I had dinner with Nina Hartley.
Okay.
She, of course, is sort of the reigning intellectual figure of the modern pornography movement. Another young woman named Shane, who had made quite a career for herself in that business, and this young woman who I had not met named Stormy Daniels.
Was she introduced with that name?
Yes, she was introduced not as... although I think I found out that her birth name was Stephanie. And what I can tell you about Stormy Daniels, she can dish.
Really?
Yes. We sat there and she told me stories about her life and about people she had known that were hilarious.
How do you think she would do as a guest?
I think she'd be fantastic.
Have you got her back?
I don't currently have her contact information, but I
think I know Mike Avenatti. We can
yeah, he gets around. No, she's amazing. She told me stories about growing up in Louisiana. She told me stories about her mother. She told me stories. Some of the stories were like really sad. Like she told me one story, she'd been going through this terrible thing and she was at this party and she was really sad and this guy came and started talking to her. What's your name? Oh, my name's Stephanie, she said. And they started chatting and he seemed to really like her and she was finding that she could relate to this guy, not as a porn star. And then he invited her back to his place because it turns out he was a big TV producer and he invites her back to his place. And as soon as he gets there, he throws open his TV cabinet and he's got the complete Stormy Daniels collection.
I didn't know there was a collection.
Oh, yeah. This was back in the day when everything was on DVD, and he had it, and he was like, oh, Stormy, I'm so excited to meet you. And she was a little heartbroken. You see? She's a real person with feelings, but she can tell a story. And if the day ever comes where she can tell exactly what happened, we've heard some of it. But when she can tell all of it, it will be great.
Did you watch the 60 Minutes?
I did.
And?
But I'll tell you one thing. I think she was telling the truth.
Why?
Because...
I've had so many people say that she was real.
Yeah, she's very real.
Like that, yeah.
Because here's the thing about Stormy Daniels and other porn stars. People think because they can't imagine that anybody would want to do that the people who end up doing it are either desperate.
Something's wrong with them.
Yeah, they're either desperate, on drugs, or really, really stupid. And that is not universally true.
What was some of the vices you said, if I didn't have my life or my career, I want to do? I want to try those vices. Come on.
It was fun. I probably, the one thing that I probably would do. I have to say, I'm spending my time with sexual outlaws.
This is kind of
like
your version of Dirty Jobs. That what's that?
Yeah,
show?
Dirty Jobs. Mike wrote Dirty Jobs.
Your vices.
A little bit like that.
Yeah.
I had none of the sexual things, frankly. And I went to strip clubs and swingers clubs and porn. No, not really for me, I don't think. But probably the one thing I would love to do is, if I had unlimited amount of money and time, is travel the world eating really, really well. Like again, going back to Alinea, the whole sort of 3-hour experience.
Yeah, so here's, I went after James Baird brought the award dinner here.
Yes, God bless you for that.
Okay, yeah. And I'm excited, Bon Appetit last year and Condé Nast both recognized Chicago #1 restaurant. I got to be honest, I did it because I'm competitive.
Yeah, of course.
James Baird, they're going to go to San Francisco. I said, well, I'll go to San Francisco. He's come to the heartland. Yeah. I had no idea how many people travel the world and they will go to a city and their only purpose is not to see a plate, it's to try 4 different restaurants, 3 different chefs.
Yeah.
There's a industry that does this.
When I moved here from...
I had no idea.
When I moved here from New York, some friends of mine said, we're coming to Chicago. What are you coming for? We have a reservation at Charlie Trotter's. I met somebody at Next
Yes.
who has a season ticket to Next, right? And you know how that works, right?
Right.
And that's, I don't know, $1,000 or more per person. They live in San Francisco. They fly from San Francisco to Chicago
Get a
3 times
hotel.
a year, get a hotel.
All right.
Just
we're
to-
for them.
Yes, we like
get
them.
more of these friends.
Exactly. One of the things I found is that there's a lot of people out there who are who are pursuing things. They're sort of chasing the dragon, to use an old phrase, if you know what I mean. There are a lot of people who are getting involved in more and more extreme things in the hope that it will sort of provide something. And it's weird. I mean, if you look at Stormy Daniels, say, what does Stormy Daniels talk about in her life that she's proud of, that she's happy about? She's got a husband, she's got a daughter, she's got a nice house outside of Texas, and she rides horses. That's what makes her happy. The other stuff she does,
It's all business.
It's all business.
Kind of like the scene in The Godfather.
Very much.
Yeah.
It's just business.
It's just business.
It's just business.
Yeah.
There's no pleasure in it.
Exactly. So in your high school yearbook,
Don't tell me you dug that up.
we do. Thank God I asked for one thing. I think is I don't want to be normal.
Yeah. My God, you did find that
So
out.
you think-
How did you do that?
So have you fulfilled your high school goal?
I mean, I was...
Because you look, let me say this, you got 3 kids.
I got 3 kids.
Yeah, you're a runner.
I am.
You got a pretty successful, not totally, because
Yeah.
you got a rabbi as a
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah.
You got a successful career.
Yeah.
Your voice is known.
It is.
Okay. Yeah, you're kind of normal.
I'm kind of,
Peter,
I'm-
you kind of, you really, Peter, I'm here to tell you, you suck. You
Right.
failed, okay? You haven't really done what you set out to do, which is to not be normal.
There are 2 cycles of life, at least for maybe...
a middle-aged Jewish guy?
There's like the early part of your life where you're like, God damn it, I am not going to be like my father. And my father was a professional corporate guy.
This is so true.
House, suburbs, steady job. And then the second phase of your life is your terror when you realize that you have become your father, when you have a nice house in the suburbs and kids that you need to support and all that stuff. And then the third and hopefully final phase, at least in this regard, where you realize that being your father isn't so bad.
So the running joke between Ari, Zeke, and I.
Yeah.
My father's an immigrant, Israel. Grew up in Palestine before it comes to Israel. And he would go around the house. If you left a light up in the room, shut the light. Just shut it. And we would then yell at our dad, I'm in the room. But you don't need the light. That was his thing. I walk around the rooms and I shut the lights off.
I know.
And my kids yell at me and
I do the same thing.
Yeah. I said, and then the other thing my dad said, what do you think? I have a printing press downstairs. Kids want to do it. I said, what do you think? We have become our fathers.
We have become our fathers.
When does it kick in that it's okay for us to acknowledge that? Since we just celebrated my dad's 91st birthday.
Mazel tov.
We took him to a good dinner.
I mean, for me, it was a little hard because I had to go through a pretty tough divorce to get to this point, about which I'll say no more. But when that happens,
Did you run a lot more during that?
Well, yeah,
a lot.
You can imagine.
Yes.
And
we're leaving that alone.
Instead of doing a big loop, I just keep going straight. When that happens, as maybe fortunately not through your own experience, but one of the things that happens is all the stuff you think you have that you can count on, your family, your house, all these things, even your relationship with your kids, all of a sudden they're under threat. And it takes a little. I'm afraid that it took that for me to realize how valuable those things are. So these days, for example, this evening, a Tuesday, I'm going to go home to my lovely little house in Oak Park where I lived for 20 years, and I'm going to settle in with my dogs and my fiance. We're getting married in June.
Mazel.
Thank you. And I'm going to sit there with my fiance and her dogs, and maybe we'll watch. I'm going to make some dinner. We're going to watch some TV, and maybe because I'm me. Maybe if this was 15 years ago in the given evening, I would have said, this is terrible. I'm stuck here at home. No, I should be out doing something or seeing something or climbing another rung of my ladder. And I don't do that anymore. And I'm sorry that it took me so long to figure that out, but I'm glad I did. And so I'm looking forward to this evening tremendously.
What is for dinner?
Well,
I'm trying to figure out if I'm coming over.
We're coming. I think I'm going to make one of my fiance's favorite, which is a pasta dish with broccoli and anchovies. She's a wonderful woman.
I'm telling you, I'm going to ask you to hold on to one thing.
Yeah.
When she becomes your wife,
yes,
you have to still make
I
her
know.
favorite. You can't just do it when she's a fiancé.
I know. Believe me.
This is a career advice.
Yes, I appreciate that.
I'm 24 years in.
Yes.
Okay.
I know more than you do because I screwed up a marriage.
Yeah.
And, as I think George Saunders said to you, or maybe you said to him, every failure is you learn from failure. So believe me, I got that down.
You got the 3 dishes that are like in the top one, 2, 3?
Oh, yeah. No, I one of the things I did was when I got divorced is I didn't want to become one of the classic divorced dads and sit around and have nothing in the refrigerator but soy sauce packets. So I actually learned to cook so I can, I can do a decent dish.
I'll make you a Greek chicken. I got that
Greek
lemon
chicken?
garlic. Yeah, lemon garlic.
That's a sort of...
And garlic. I love that chicken.
Yeah. Now, what is it, like a marinade, or is it more of a...
It's a marinated.
Yeah, and then you roast it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or bake it. You could do either one.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
So, all right, now we got the fast round.
Okay.
You ready?
The lightning round. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
How much time do I have?
You just got to go, man, okay?
All right,
it's not that hard. Cub
right.
socks.
All right, Cub socks.
Just said no. Cub socks.
Socks.
Okay.
But there's a long story.
Okay, we'll ask you back.
All right.
Okay. Lake, river.
Lake, although I appreciate what's been done with the river. I've run up and down it, but it's not long enough yet.
We got coming
All
your
right.
way, okay? Thick or thin pizza?
Oh, yeah, God. Thin pizza. Deep dish pizza, I'm going to say this to the mayor, is a travesty. It's a scandal, and only tourists should eat it, and even they shouldn't eat it.
I think we need to cut this interview down to about 10 minutes. Okay. All right. Willis or Hancock?
Willis.
Sears.
What are you,
Sears.
I Hancock, I think. Although I just heard, did you hear this? That the Sears Tower was inspired by a pack of cigarettes? Somebody told me this.
I have not. You should put that on a radio show.
Somebody was shaking. The architects were sitting around, and somebody shook a pack of cigarettes. You know how sometimes cigarettes come out one tall, one a little less. He looked at it and said,
"I never
hey.
smoked. When you're a runner, you don't smoke."
I don't smoke either.
Okay.
I heard the story. It's a good story.
16-inch, 12-inch softball.
I'm actually a 12-inch softball guy. I never understood 16-inch. I'm not from here, and that's one of the things I could never adopt to. Give me a mitt and put me in the outfield.
First of all, it took you a bit of a time on Sox Cub, which I really don't buy. I really think you're a Cubs fan.
I'm not a Cubs fan. I'm actually a Red Sox fan who became developed an allegiance to the White Sox fan when I moved here, because White Sox fans at that time were just as miserable as Red Sox fans, while Cubs fans are generally too happy.
Well, you got 3 out of 5
all
on
right,
the passing grade, so we'll let you be.
Do you, wait a minute, as the mayor of Chicago, do you actually endorse deep dish pizza? As a Chicagoan?
Well,
you actually think this is good?
Well, it's very good.
Yeah.
Do you know that was weird? So here's the thing: when we announced the Laver Cup,
which is very exciting.
Very exciting. And I said we were standing in the green room. I said, "What did you guys do? When did you get in?" They said, "Oh, a couple hours ago." I said, "What'd you do?" Thinking maybe we went for pizza. I said, "You got to be kidding me."
Oh, that's what everybody does.
Yes,
I'm sure.
And they liked it. I said, "I would be asleep. I don't have.
No,
I can't handle this anymore."
People come to see my show. They fly from out of town. They get tickets. They come to see my show.
And you can give them like 600 restaurants.
I say, it's like as you say, the finest dining city in the world. You can get the fine. You can go to Alinea. You can go to the best tacos you've ever had in Pilsen. You can get like totally legit Chinese food. You can get anything you want, and you ate that.
See, here's my thing. If you're going to come to, and I'm not speaking ill because I don't want to be attacked by any of the pizza.
No, I understand. You're a
Chicago.
politician. You have to play the middle.
If I was coming to this town, and I wanted to get something with Chicago, I go to the Weenie Circle.
Exactly. You go to the Wiener Circle, you get a Chicago dog. Or you go out to Johnny's in Elmwood Park and you get an Italian beef. You don't eat deep dish. Sorry, I get a little
How many
agitated.
miles do you run a week?
These days, I'm I'm only about 25, 30. I've done more in my day.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking.
You should need to, right?
What?
You need to try yoga.
I do yoga. I do yoga about twice a week. I do, because
I'm
old.
a big believer in it.
Big believer in yoga?
I do it 3 times a week.
But you did a Chicago triathlon, right?
I'm going to do it again.
Right.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's fun. You get to ride a bike. It's fun. There's a huge crowd. It's the biggest triathlon in the world. I like it.
You can always then say, I actually like that whole shtick for, and the reason is you're competing against your time, and there's a sense of community with everybody else. You're not really competing against them.
Right.
It's Peter versus Peter.
Exactly.
Ram versus Ram.
Yeah, exactly.
Except for when we really do well, and then we can just rub it in everybody else's
Exactly.
faces.
That's exactly the point, is just self-satisfaction bleeding over into bragging.
Is there something I missed that, because we do have your high school quote, is there something I missed that we should have talked about that people need to know about Peter Sagal?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, we got to the most important point, that I hate dip dish pizza, and I think it should be stamped out.
No, we got the most important point is that you're in love.
I am.
And you're about to embark on the great journey.
I am, the great journey of love. And
I will give you the Rahm Emanuel from Ben Emanuel.
Yes.
That's sage advice.
Yes, please.
All right, 2, marriage is not a destination, it's a journey. Mm-hmm. My father's other advice was, marriage is a movie theater. Those in want to get out, and those out want to get in. So welcome. Peter Sagal, Chicago Stories. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real pleasure.
You got it.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Chicago Stories with Mayor Rahm Emanuel. You can subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet your guest ideas using hashtag ShyStories. Thanks for listening.